Our agenda today, I'm going to give you a quick introduction, let you know who I am, and give you a little background around Results Positive. I'd like to also talk to you about risk-based quality management, some reasons to implement RBQM and HP ALM. I'm going to give you a short demo of using RBQM and HP Quality Center. Also give you some information around ALI that's relevant to teams that are using ALM today, and also Agile Manager. We'll discuss a few reasons why you should enable ALI within HP ALM to gain better visibility and control, and give you a short demo of ALI and how it can tie into some of your source code management and build systems such as TFS. Also, we'll talk briefly about some of the ALM service offerings from Results Positive. So Results Positive, who are we? So we are a North American consulting and software solutions provider. We're also a software reseller of HP. We make no secrets about that. Today we're going to be promoting, obviously, the use of HP Quality Center and ALM. That's where the risk-based quality management is built around, and we'll be discussing that functionality inherent to the requirements management module of this platform. We are a software platinum partner. We have over 220 customers, growing fairly rapidly, and we're also the current HP Software Partner of the Year. So just another quick slide before we get into the topic here. So of course we're going to be talking about ALM today. Results Positive, based out of Arizona. You can see we cover a plethora of different areas as well. So I like to start off my webinars and presentations with a few quotes, just to kind of set the tone for what we're going to be speaking about today. And of course, Dr. Deming here, the father of quality, one of the quotes that comes out from him is, so he says, quality comes not from testing, but from improvement of the development process. So, you know, a lot of people joke on some of these large-scale implementations that we're now entering into the bug-fixing phase of the project. Sometimes they don't even call it the testing phase because it's let's identify as many bugs as we can and let's fix them, and let's try to regression test around those fixes and hope we don't break anything else before we promote to either the next testing layer or into production. Whereas, you know, Dr. Deming's quote here really kind of shines a light on, you know, it's not all about the testing phase. It's about the application lifecycle management, and that's really, you know, these are my sentiments exactly as the title says, and that's going to be a large focal point of today's webinar, is to really speak about how can we look at the overall picture and how can we tie all the entities together to thus employ risk-based quality management, and how can we leverage ALI to really peer into the development process too and help control from a visibility perspective. His second quote here is from John Wooden. He said, "If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over?" So this particular quote kind of rings true with me because, honestly, we really don't have time to do it over. Oftentimes, you know, the pace of delivery today, especially in the software world, is moving faster and faster, and it seems you never see anybody put up their hands and do a timeout and say, hey, timeout, we have to do this over. I mean, occasionally you do see it on projects. You do see projects that stop and restart, but oftentimes you have to get it right the first time. So, you know, that's the focus as well of this webinar, is how do we get it right the first time? How do we set up the requirements module in such a way, and how do we score these requirements from a risk perspective in order to get it right the first time? Okay. So this slide here, I said, what does risk-based testing involve? So risk-based testing, we hear it, you know, we read about it, but you know, what is it really, and how can we use HP Quality Center or ALM for that matter to employ a risk-based testing approach across our organizations? So at its highest level, we think about it and we say, you know what, risk-based testing starts with assessing requirements. Right? Thinking about the business criticality of that requirement, the failure probability, and the functional complexity. But even more, it's really about laser focusing your team's efforts around testing efforts in the high risk areas. Like the days of 100% coverage are gone. You know, there's too much complexity involved in all of us in the different systems. We have interfaces galore. For the folks on the line who are running SAP or PeopleSoft or Oracle, we understand that you could have in any given implementation testing of 100 to 200 different interfaces. Maybe you have 30 to 40 internal subsystems, but you have 150 external trading partners that you're doing EDI with or trading XML, things of that nature. So how do we, in the light of resource constraints and time constraints, really laser focus our efforts around what we need to laser focus our efforts around? And that's what risk-based testing is really all about. The third point here, I said reliance and discipline around accurate traceability to test plans. So accurate traceability. A lot of organizations, as you know, we kind of stumble when it comes to traceability, and we stumble when it comes to discipline, because when you traceability requires follow through and discipline. So we're going to talk about steps that you can take today, and we're going to also provide everybody on the call with a bonus material, a workshop guideline. Free. We're going to email it out to everybody to kind of help you get your teams aligned so you can start conducting some of these requirements tracing workshops from HP Quality Center so that you can take better advantage of risk-based quality management. And of course, the fourth bullet point here is the definition of risk categories, values, and weights across requirement types to drive your testing policy. So within HP Quality Center and ALM, you can go into the customization feature and define how you want to weight some of this criterion. Every organization is different. Every organization weights criterion at a different level. So, the customization feature of ALM and Quality Center allows you to modify that per your organization. Okay. And of course, the last point here is all of this is for nothing unless we have cross-functional collaborative effort between our QA organization, business analysis teams, development teams, and PMOs, and PMO team, of course. It's a collaborative effort to bring everybody together during the requirements tracing workshops, scoring the requirements, and so on and so forth. And we'll touch upon that as well. So here's some reasons. I kind of touched upon the reasons to implement risk-based quality management, but I want to iterate these one more time here. So time, resource, and quality constraints. We've all been in situations where you're heading into the fourth or fifth system integration testing cycle. The deadline for go live is looming. The decision is to go from 8 weeks down to 4 weeks, as an example. Well, what do we do in that situation? We have a fixed finite number of resources because, of course, we don't have the budget to scale up to 50 more resources to get through testing. So how do we focus those limited resources around the existing test coverage we have? So the bottom line is trade-off decisions must be made. The second bullet point here is large projects, of course, are prime candidates for risk-based quality management. Large projects and, of course, new technology as well. So it helps us prioritize testing efforts to make sense of the madness, so to speak. And then the third bullet point here is underscores the importance of end-to-end traceability. So I mentioned it before. You'll hear me say it a lot throughout this webinar today. So traceability to me really aids in the test planning efforts as well. So knowing test coverage of your requirements, how they trace down to your test cases, helps you plan accordingly. So you'll get the testing policy from risk-based quality management in terms of how many hours are roughly should be devoted to testing these set of requirements. But having that traceability down to the test cases within your test plan allows you to schedule it out accordingly, and you'll see how that kind of ties together. And the second sub-bullet here is, with ALI, Application Lifecycle Intelligence, enabled, and we'll talk about that later, you're going to now have visibility down into the development activity that's occurring, especially if your teams are producing .NET applications, Java applications. There's even add-ins available for Quality Center around SAP. You can link directly to Solution Manager as an example. So the need for requirements tracing discipline is significantly increased with the use of risk-based quality management. And the guidelines we'll send out to you will help your company drive that discipline. So what I have open here in Internet Explorer, I have two tabs open here. So I have one tab, I'm in one project, and I just logged into another tab for sake of simplicity. I'm going to cover the ALI functionality briefly as I talk through risk-based quality management here, but I'm also going to hit upon it again towards the latter half of the webinar. So around 12:35, 12:40 Eastern Standard Time, we'll get into some more of the ALI functionality. But from a risk-based quality management perspective, if you're using Quality Center today, which a lot of folks who've joined this webinar probably are, this should not look unfamiliar to you. So we're in the requirements management module. If you're on an older version of Quality Center, the layout and the GUI might look a little bit different, but this should look pretty standard. The hierarchical tree structure to the left-hand side here. What we have here is some requirements that are typically used during demos by HP is the Mercury Tours application. So we've probably seen that before, that basic website that HP has out there to kind of demonstrate some of their products. And these are the requirements associated with that demo AUT or application under test. So what I've done here, and what I want to clue everybody into in this particular webinar, and like I said, this is an awareness webinar. It's not a training. I'm going to take you through some points and just kind of show you, clue everybody into it to bring awareness to where you can start using risk-based quality management. So booking system, under this specific folder here, we have a set of requirements. So over here under details, we have our functional requirements. We also have groups of requirements. As you know, as most folks probably know, you can group different requirements within here to kind of make it a little bit more structurally organized from a logical perspective. So what we have here is some functional requirements under credit card. So if you come over here under risk analysis, you can see I've already ran the analysis on this set of requirements here. But if we take a look at specific requirements, let me clue your attention into some of the assessment questions. Okay, so at the beginning of the webinar, I mentioned criticality, failure probability, and functional complexity. So 3 different areas that you're going to take into account as you step through your different requirements. And there's various criterion that's set up through customization on the back end of Quality Center. And I'll go into this in a quick second, but I want to go from left to right here across criticality, probability, and complexity. So everybody has their definitions of the type of process that they use: standard, calculation, validation, data change, display. You're also going to have specific weights within your organization around this. And when I say weights, it's the emphasis that's placed on it to determine your testing policy, and I'll show you that within customization. So risk-based quality management, how do you go about doing this? So your business analysis team, or your RAs, your requirement analysis team for that matter, and your subject matter experts or your process champions would work together to evaluate all of your requirements that you have within HP Quality Center or ALM. Okay, they would work from left to right. So if you think about it, you're going to involve your business first, logically. Your business is going to go through each of your requirements and score them essentially across these categories. And the scores across these categories have a value associated with it on the back end, which I'll show shortly. Then you're going to identify the failure probability of this particular requirement. And failure probability is determined from a myriad of factors, including the maturity of the software. So if it's new technology, obviously, it's going to be immature, which the failure probability increases. The prior defect rate, you can determine that, and the number of affected screens and entities. And of course, the change type as well, whether it's a new feature, changed feature, unchanged. So those will all factor into your testing policy. Your functional complexity, criterion in terms of the number of entities involved. If you think about it, interfaces with third parties, such as a tax determination system, as an example, or a transportation planning solution. If you're sending data from SAP over to JD Edwards or Manugistics, for that matter, not Manugistics anymore, JDA. There might be some more complexities involved in there, so you're touching more entities. So the functional complexity, of course, is increased, and there's a higher likelihood that you're going to identify defects during your testing phase. So you can define all that within here in your assessment questions and here on the back end. So I'm going to go into customization quickly, and we'll let that load up. There we go. And risk-based quality management. So this should not look unfamiliar for those who have site administrator or who have customization access on the particular projects. Um, but here is, the double-edged sword really of sometimes ALM is it's highly customizable, and that's the double-edged sword. So you have to be careful in terms of, how much you want to customize this, but you have the ability to change almost everything. So you can modify your weight, your ranges down here. Nice to have, important and critical. You can modify, the ordering here. You can introduce new criterion as well. So these are just the out-of-the-box criterion that you would use. Every organization kind of scores requirements a little bit differently. So left to right, failure probability, the same type of thought process here, except for the fact that you're now looking at different values, of course, in the drop-down, so and different weights associated with that. So you can change the weights and values to your liking, and this all ties into when you change these weights and values, it affects the algorithm, which determines the testing policy, which I'll show you in a second. And your risk calculation here, you can change your policy. This is just a matrix where you can change the values here across high, medium, low. Functional complexity, and the same type of concept that we showed you in criticality and probability. You can remove criterion, you can add criterion, you can change the values here. Okay. And risk constants, this is obviously a very important tab when you're in risk-based quality management. A lot of organizations, you'll focus your testing time around hours or days. Of course, you can change your units of measure here very easily. I kind of scaled this down a little bit for this particular webinar today. This was a bit higher. So out of the box, you might see, I think, 16 hours at 24 for high, and then half of that for medium, and then a quarter of that for low. And you can also change these in here to your partial and your basic. Okay. So that's on the back end. That's project customization. So it's fully customizable. You can change how you wish. Our recommendation is to obviously go to your business analysis team, go to your RA team for that matter, collectively come together and decide what criterion you're going to score requirements against for risk-based quality management. And together you can do that. What you do after you've set that all up on the back end is on the front end, after you've imported your requirements for that matter into the tool set itself, is you're going to come in here and your RAs or your business analysts or your process champions would be tasked with answering the assessment questions. Once the assessment questions are answered, this toggles from in progress to completed. And over here is, once that's completed, your testing policy will not display right away. You won't see this. So this testing policy is displayed after you run the analysis. So coming back up to the group level. So notice here, group level, credit card, come over here to details. You can see this requirement type is labeled as group. Under the requirement, this is a specific requirement type, a functional requirement. So coming back up to group and going over to risk analysis, notice the difference here, right? So assessment results, assessment questions, but when I come up to the group level, I'm seeing this ability. So with that being said, as we know, software is evolving. It's not static. It's not going to stay the same. So as you evolve, as your product evolves, and you write change requests, as an example, if you're using the requirements management module to log your change requests or enhancements, you'll trace those, or maybe you'll create them under this particular group. And when you reanalyze this group of requirements, it'll take into account the change requests that you add into here. So as you add change requests into HP Quality Center or ALM, you're going to take it through the same process, the same requirements intake process that you have defined today as an organization. So you'll go through those assessment questions on that change request as well. And then when you come back in, you'll have the ability to analyze and apply to children. So basically what ALM does is it does a quick analysis. It runs the algorithm based on the information that you plugged in, and then it takes that data and it propagates it across your different requirements. So it creates a testing policy essentially for your different requirements. So the question now is, so what? we have this testing policy. What does that mean? How are we going to use this to better our organization or to save time or gain visibility and control? So there's two different ways in my mind that you can use this. Number one is when you're looking at your requirements, you can see the testing policy is calculated based on this, okay, for each of these. So basically, really what Quality Center gives you is it gives you a calculated testing level and a calculated testing time. So you're saying, okay, well, 4 hours. Really, is that pragmatic? You're thinking, is that realistic? Well, in my mind, how I use risk-based quality management in the past is I would use this information that was calculated from this analysis, and from a test coverage perspective, I could use it to drill down on these test cases and then look at the historical run rate of these test cases if they've been executed before. If they haven't, then I had a better idea of where I stood, and I would compare and contrast the length of the test cases, if they were manual test cases for that matter, up against the risk assessment that came out of here. Okay, so that's one way. But before I talk to you about the development activity, this right here, this particular tab, development activity, you only see that tab when ALI is enabled. And ALI is only available in application lifecycle management. So this particular tab gives you insight into development activity coming from your IDEs, your developers, as they're working in their native environments, as they're committing code changes. That information feeds up through into ALM. But before I show that, I want to come back over to the presentation quickly, and I'd like to give some backdrop around ALI, and then I'm going to kind of bring it full circle and kind of show you how this risk-based quality management kind of ties in with the development activity tab. So moving back over here. So this looks familiar. You've probably seen this slide, and this is a NHP slide that we've used before to kind of demonstrate where we're at as a society, I guess, when it comes to software development. So there's a lot of tools, right? We're dealing with tools everywhere, and it's becoming managed chaos. So the questions in the project manager's mind, QA manager, test manager, how can I track the status of these projects across all of my different teams, decentralized, all of my different tools, all the different versions of tools, and how can I understand change impact and get risk and quality metrics from this information? So, HP's answer to that is application lifecycle intelligence, which is embedded within ALM and allows you to truly peer into other IDEs, source code management, and build servers. Okay, so here are the key benefits of ALI. So it's connecting your developers, your testers, your business analysts, and project managers who are all using disparate tools. People get comfortable in the tools that they use. We know that. A developer is, if he or she is using Visual Studio or if he or she is using Eclipse, they like to work in their native environments. They like to, spend their time doing what they do best, and that's to develop. They don't want to have to go into ALM or Quality Center and log comments in there too, and they might manage their defects from there when you assign it to them, but they might not want to go into the requirements management module to do anything in there. They want to focus on what their task is at hand within their IDE. So what ALI enables us to do as practitioners and leaders of projects is to allow our team to work within their native environments but still have that visibility and control within one centralized platform. And that's what this point is all about, gain real-time traceability across all of these different tools. And of course, minimize risk in your application development projects with analytics from decision-making across all stakeholders. So if we look around here, the peripheral, you can, up here, project and program managers, of course, are particularly interested in the dashboard reporting and the analysis items that are available within ALM. But QA manager over here is particularly interested in requirements management, test planning, execution, defect management, a little bit of everything. Developers and architects, as I said before, would love to work from their IDEs. Don't really appreciate being bothered too much to take on additional tasks as their capacity is fully utilized most of the time as well. And of course, business analysts down here, as I spoke about before, would be an integral part of the risk-based quality management process and scoring your requirements to make sure you have a good idea of where you stand and where you need to focus your attention on from a testing perspective. Okay? And in here, of course, in the middle, we have all the different components that would tie into application lifecycle management or quality center with code and build in bold. So ALI brings you the code and build perspective into the requirements, testing, defects, and tasks. Okay, so here you go. Here's just a quick screenshot, and then we'll take you in and we'll actually show you for real how this looks. But basically, what happens with ALI is it's basically gonna map ALM to different metadata elements coming from IDEs. So coming from your IDE or coming from your source code management software, your build TFS, for example. We can link directly into TFS and we pull information from there. So when there's code changes that occur, you're going to have visibility into that, as well as visibility into what developers are touching what code and what files are associated with that. And it's all it all traces back up to the requirements level. So what that does for you from a risk-based quality management perspective, it also allows you to estimate the development time of each of the requirements better. And of course, you probably do that already outside of the tool set. You're estimating development time for new features, maybe in another tool or within Excel. But now you can do it within Quality Center. And now you can use historical evidence as well to better estimate development time. So you can look at changes that have occurred to a requirement in the past and use that as a gauge or a point of reference to help build better estimates going forward. Okay. There's also a myriad of different plugins available on HP Live Network. So HP ALM, if you do a quick Google search, HP Live Network is out there for the public. There's plugins available for your source code management systems, plugins available for your build systems, and also plugins for your IDEs, including Eclipse, IntelliJ, and Visual Studio. And I think there's more being added as we move forward. As I mentioned before, traceability to your code changes, number of lines the developer assigned to that particular code change. Also a change impact analysis report. That's what you're looking here is it's kind of like a build change analysis report showing the requirements that were impacted here, the changes, the files, lines of code, the developers who touched it. So what this really does is, I don't know if anybody on the line has experienced this before, but in my career as a QA director and manager in different consultative roles, sometimes there's a black hole in terms of the development activity that's occurring, especially on these very large ERP projects, large-scale projects. Perhaps you have development offshored. Maybe you have some onshore development. Usually maybe onshore is just a customization piece. Maybe they're doing some ABAPing offshore as an example. But it becomes where it is difficult to really hold people accountable sometimes on very large-scale projects because you're not really sure where the problems are stemming from. What ALI has been able to do for organizations today is really allow them to peer down to the level that is needed to hold people accountable on your teams and to understand where the disconnects or where the defects are being injected at, as an example. Once you get to once the rubber starts hitting the road, once you start, getting into the build phase and you're doing the unit testing and you're doing before you even progressing from unit testing into system testing, because you're going to be able to see what unit testing is occurring through the connection from ALI into your IDEs and source code management systems. So you can see where everything is occurring. You'll have a better understanding and a better gauge of confidence as to whether you're going to be able to successfully get through a system integration testing cycle within the allotted time provided to you by the project management team. Okay. So that's that. I want to pop back over into ALM, give you a quick ALI demo. This demo, like I said, this webinar is all about awareness, and this particular demo is from the ALM side. I'm not going to demo it from the IDE. I'm just going to kind of show you what you would see within ALM once you have ALI enabled and once you have it hooked into your source code management system of choice. So coming back over here. This particular project, we have ALI enabled. We have it enabled on the other project too. I just didn't get any fresh data into the other project from our source code management systems. So we built out a small example here to show you today. So what we have here is this here is a group, again, like we talked about before. It's you're grouping requirements together. We have a few different requirements that we define, just basic functional requirements. And this particular one is this requirement says use Maven to build a client share Eclipse settings. It's not related to the application that we talked about before. So disregard the Mercury Tours application for this example. Just kind of focus on the functionality of ALI. So once you enable ALI in a project, okay, there's two different ways you can do it. If you're familiar with site administration, if you have an on-premise installation of ALM, you can do it through site administration. Quickly enable it. You can't disable it after you enable it, though. Just keep that in mind. So if you're enabling it and you enable it on a per project basis, you can also enable it when you create your project as well. You're going to see a few different things when you enable ALI. You're going to see an additional module that's going to appear under defects, and that module has two submodules, one called builds and one called code changes. Okay. Once you configure the configuration here, I guess I should show you this first. You're going to configure ALI after it's enabled to speak to your different systems, in layman's terms. So your source code management repository here, you'll plug in your location, your username and password, and basically it will synchronize, for lack of a better term, with your system there, and it'll also synchronize with your build server. So same type of deal here. You plug in the address, the name, username, and password, and the synchronization occurs there. Oops. So after that is in place, after you have successfully synchronized with your source code management, your build server, you're also going to have your developers download the plugins from HP Live Network to install on their native workstations. So basically what happens, I'll speak to it quickly, is the IDE, you'll have additional options within the IDE where developers can then say work within their native environment, and if there's changes that are needed to a requirement, that particular task comes up within their IDE, their native environment. So as they check in code, they can link it to a specific requirement, and then it feeds back up into ALM here. So looking over here, as I mentioned before, this particular tab also appears, development activity. So development activity, you'll be able to see here traceability from the requirement level. So you're on the functional requirement here, down into development activity occurring on that particular requirement, all the way from code changes to active developers involved and the lines of code modified. So we can see we only have, for this example, sort of a limited data set to provide an example from. But Alex ALM here is the only developer, and his contributions were 100%, 5 files, 45 lines of code. Over here, the code changes, you can see what the code changes are here that he's made and the lines for each of them, along with the dates. So you have visibility even into the unit tests that were executed as a result. And by clicking on these URLs here, you are able to get a report, as I showed here, that you can export from HP ALM and provide to stakeholders on your project. Okay, so that is basically, in a nutshell, what occurs with ALI. How you can use that in conjunction with risk-based quality management and the risk assessment is coming back over to risk assessment. You have the ability to also identify the estimated development time. The estimated development time of your different requirements, which is visible within your testing policy. So back over here under testing policy, you can see we've estimated the development time here across our functional requirements. And to keep things simple, we kept it at 5 across the board. But what we can use once ALI is enabled is you can then look at the history of the development activity here, and you can better gauge what your development time is going to be over here in your risk assessment, which ties into your testing policy as well. So coming up here, you can see now at the group level of a particular requirement, you have the total required development time included within here. And it keeps everything centralized and in one spot and helps you to manage the overall delivery cycle much better.